Okay, welcome back everyone. Today is a day that I really want to focus in on communication. Communication is huge. It's such a big part of life. It's such a big part of all relationships. I see it every day in my practice where couples aren't communicating very effectively and they struggle with finding the right way to communicate, the effective way of communicating. So let me start by just talking about 4 different types of communication. I'll start with passive. Now, passive communication is someone who is just keeping everything inside. They're internalizing a lot of their emotions, a lot of their thoughts and feelings. A passive person doesn't speak up very much. Sometimes what happens though is that passive person, the emotions and the conflict builds and builds and builds, and then they explode, and then they might be aggressive, and then they go back to being passive and passive. Passive people harbor resentment over time. And remember, resentment is anger with a history. So that's not uncommon for passive people because they've been maybe taken advantage of or manipulated by others, and they've been holding all this emotion inside for days, weeks, months. So passive is one communication style. Another one is aggressive, and that's someone who's loud and obnoxious, someone who is rude, and someone who interrupts all the time and is not really concerned about the people around them. They're just concerned about themselves. They can be disrespectful. They can even be hurtful. So aggressive people often alienate others. Now the third type is called passive aggressive. And a passive aggressive person is not direct. They're passive, so they keep stuff in, but they get back at you indirectly, in a covert way, in a subtle way. It's kind of like guerrilla warfare. They will be vindictive in their attack back, but it will be very discreet and subtle. An example might be if you have a friend who is upset with you. Maybe you said something to them yesterday and they got really upset with you, but they didn't tell you because they held it. And then today rolls around and you send them a text and they don't respond. You send them a second, no response. So you call them, they don't answer, and you leave a message, and 3 days go by, and finally you run into them and you say, what's going on? I've tried to reach out to you on several occasions, and they say, well, I've just been really busy, which is not the truth. It's not they've been busy, it's that they didn't want to confront you on a conflict that occurred the other day within them, and they didn't give you the opportunity to maybe apologize or to maybe explain why you said what you said. So passive aggressive people also have negative emotions built up, but they tend to get back at people in an indirect way. They tend to be vindictive. Now the healthy one, the last one, is called assertive. And assertive is being direct, it's being open, and it's being honest. And it's doing it in a non-offensive way, in a respectful way, in a kind way, maybe even in a loving way. That is assertive. Now, assertiveness is a skill, and it's a skill that you can learn, that anyone can learn. It takes time to practice it, but all of us can learn to be assertive more consistently and benefit from being assertive. And assertiveness works, and it's effective not only in our personal relationships, with our spouse, with our boyfriend, girlfriend, with our friends, but also in our professional life. Being assertive is very helpful in our careers and in our professional relationships. The goal is to be assertive between 80 and 85% of the time. Now, can we be assertive all the time? Of course not. Do I tend to, lean towards assertive? Of course, I try to be assertive in that 80 to 85% range, but sometimes I'm not. And sometimes I'm aggressive or passive aggressive. But my goal is to shoot for, to strive to be assertive in that percentage. So let me talk with you a little bit about assertive and why it's so good and why it's so beneficial. So one reason is because if you're assertive from the get-go, even if you have to move a little more aggressively or a little more passively, depending on the circumstance, you leave your options open. Whereas if you're passive from the get-go, it's hard to move up. Or aggressive from the get-go, it's hard to move down. Assertive gives you options. It leaves your options open. So part of being assertive is being able to use I instead of you. I'm frustrated. I get really angry when you did this, you said this. Starting the sentence with I. Because if you start it with you, it's going to put the other person on the defensive. You frustrate me. You irritate me. It's going to sound like an attack. So start the sentence with I. Use I instead of you. The second thing is to remember that you're assertive for you, not for them. And what I mean by that is you can't change them. You can tell them how their behavior makes you feel or their actions make you feel, but ultimately you don't have control over them. So you're doing it for you. You're doing it to get it off your chest, but you're also doing it for self-respect. It'll raise your self-esteem when you can be assertive with people. They may or may not change, but it's still worthwhile to be assertive. And remember that you're focused on their behavior and the emotional impact. So it might be, it frustrates me when you leave dirty dishes in the sink. You're not attacking their character, you're not calling them a name, you're focused on a behavior. When you leave dirty dishes in the sink, it frustrates me. Or I get frustrated when you leave your wet towel on the floor. Period. Leave it there. Be able to say it and let it go. And that's the other thing that people struggle with. They have a hard time letting it go. I want you to work on saying it and leaving it. Recognizing that they may change, they may not change. And if you're assertive multiple occasions with a person that you care about and that you love, and they don't change, then what do? Well, you have some options. You can change the way you approach them, or you can maybe take a look at this relationship and why you're continually sharing your thoughts and feelings and the other person is not listening. It may be that this is a relationship that is going to require some counseling or some work in order for it to make a change, in order for the relationship to improve. So one last thing on assertiveness. It's not just what you say, but it's how you say it. Your delivery matters. And that would be your tone of voice, your inflection, your body language, your facial expression, your eye contact, all of that. In fact, studies have shown that 93% of communication is nonverbal. So your delivery is so important. I can't tell you how many times people have said, if you could just change your tone of voice, because your tone of voice might be very aggressive. And that can create a disconnect. So it's not just how you communicate it, like I just said, it's also what you communicate. It's both. But the how you communicate it, your delivery, is essential, and it is really, really important. So there are ways of communicating differently. There are ways to work on being assertive, and recognize that when you're assertive, it's going to create a better connection, a better bond between you and the people around you. When you're not assertive, it's going to create a disconnect. So work on being assertive, Work on expressing your emotions in a healthy and constructive way, and be aware of the nonverbals. Good luck. Work on this communication style because it really does make a huge difference. Until next time, Dr. Tony Ferretti, signing off.